So love to you, Liz Webster of Save British Farming. Liz Webster is a leading figure in the Remain campaign. She took the government to court in 2017 under the Article 50 challenge. She's a founding member of Save British Farming, and she campaigns for food security and to save the British food industry. So welcome, Liz. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks very much for asking me. It's a pleasure to be part of your organisation for the evening.
Great. And we've got Bernd helping us with IT, and we've got Paul who'll be taking your questions on social media. So if you have any questions, just pop them into Facebook or X, as it's called now. So Liz, can you give us a brief overview of your work so far and how you became involved in campaigning?
Well, Brexit sort of pulled me in, really. I became politicised because my son was attacked in 2007, and so that incident at school, it was at a school, really sort of got me more aware of things that were going on, and Brexit really completely pulled me in. Because the people running the school were one of the governors was Robert Buckland, and I'd also had a meeting with Michael Gove. I was especially concerned about, and with Brexit, I knew. I sort of had a pretty good gut instinct that they meant harm and real harm. So it pulled me straight in, really, and I just started getting involved and through social media and one thing or another. And yeah, I haven't been able to put it down, unfortunately. Plus my husband mad, probably, but I just feel motivated to fight it because it feels so wrong. So that's how it started, and yeah, just meeting people on social media and getting involved, and then getting involved with the local party, and one thing or another led to another, and it's gone from quite humble beginnings through to having led by donkeys here and standing as a parliamentary candidate, and yes, taking the government to court, and then setting up. Initially we set up Farmers for a People's Vote, which became Save British Farming.
Oh, I see. So that's how it started, right?
Yeah,
and what kind of work do you do, and what kind of members are in Save British Farming?
We don't have. It's not a membership organisation. It's just a campaign group. So at the core of it is a mixture of mostly farmers. Not all of them voted Remain. There are a couple of ones that didn't. And there's a variety of different people as well who've got an interest in or attached somehow in food and farming peripherally, whether that's through PR or those sort of links. And some of them were just some of the people that have been helping out have just been members of EU groups who understood the need to connect Brexit through food. Because it's the one thing that the Remain campaign really failed on. They focused on the farmers, and that's why everybody comes out and says, "Oh, farmers voted for Brexit," and it's been a very useful narrative for the government, because more often than not, you get people saying, "I've got no sympathy for the farmers," because people aren't connecting farming to their food, and the real victim of Brexit is our food system, and our public health is directly linked to that, our well-being and safety, and all of that is at risk because of Brexit, particularly at the moment because we've got no checks of incoming goods. Anything sent via Rotterdam can come in, and it's only a matter of time until we have a major public health scandal because of that. And so it really is trying to get people to understand that. I think the beauty of the European Union membership means that we seamlessly went from a very bad food system. We had very little choice. We often used to have shortages, and good food was expensive. And it was very seamless, the change. And then people have just taken it for granted. The supermarkets evolved at the same time, and we've had, cheap food, good quality, and a lot of choice. And all of that is literally being sucked away by Brexit reality, and the Ukraine war is not helping.
And how did you get support when you started the organisation? Is there a specific kind of geographical spread, or is it farmers all over the UK? And did you experience any hostility as well?
Oh yes, so it definitely got hostility. We started out as a small, because we started out doing Farmers for People's Vote. We took sheep to London, I don't know if you remember, and it was all over the press that day. And we launched a report about Brexit with the ex-chief economist of the NFU, who I work with, Sean Rickard. And so from that core group, really, of different people, and then also via the farming press and other farming organisations. And there was hostility to it. Some farmers are still attached to Brexit because they cannot understand the complexities of it, most of them, and some of them, or some of them are ideologically attached to sort of this libertarian sort of aggressive push. So it is a complicated thing. But the main core of the campaign wasn't necessarily being here for farmers. It's about trying to get the message about farming out to campaigners and people and the public about their food. So, which is why often on our posters we have Save British Food. And so we sort of use both things, because the biggest, I mean, when we first launched, after Brexit happened, the biggest attacks came from Remainers who were angry with farmers for Brexit, and it still goes on today. And it was quite astonishing for some Remain campaigners seeing these attacks, because you suddenly saw Remainers in a different light. And it's social media, people see something behind a screen and then they just let rip, and the anger and resentment is there. But and I think we have done well on Twitter and on Facebook. I think we really have pushed that forward. People are understanding it better, which is what we need. We need people to understand, as I said, food, the cost of living, public health, the NHS, all of these things are linked. I was talking to a doctor last week who, for them in the NHS, the thought of more foodborne illness is the last thing that the NHS needs right now, or another major epidemic of some sort. So all of these things are actually linked. But the government have been they're very clever at creating scapegoats and building a narrative. And once it's in people's brains, it's really difficult to change it. So we've just recently been pushing on YouTube, and because it's a different audience, the same attacks actually are happening again. So, and even from people in Europe or whatever, oh, you farmers, you all voted Brexit, and it's like, oh no, not this again. But this is the nature of campaigning, is just about trying to communicate, what people need to learn about. Because without food, we're in a lot of trouble.
Obviously, yeah. I mean, that's very sad to hear about Remainers, giving you abuse. I hope that changes in the future. But has there been any kind of immediate consequences of the vote on Brexit in terms of food in Britain, or is it been a kind of gradual decline, or like what's
No, it was immediate after Brexit happened. The immediate thing was the red tape, and a lot of exporters went out of business or stopped exporting altogether. I mean, the people that we use for our beef didn't even bother. They've given up exporting completely. Marks and Spencer's, in fact, gave up exporting food to Europe. So, it's not just very small exporters, it's, sort of medium-sized ones as well. So that had a major impact. A lot of businesses have gone under. It's been particularly bad for cheese businesses as well. And then the gradual withdrawal of our subsidy. In England, only Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland are still getting food subsidies until the end of this Parliament. So actually, for the English farmers, it's been worse. And then, we've had these cheap imports coming in of all varying standards, which have undercut the pork sector. I don't know if you saw that in the COVID pandemic. The processors were choosing the cheaper imported pork. There was a labour shortage in the processing plants, and then we had all of these pigs backed up on farms, and people got out of the industry. And the thing is, once they get out, they won't go back in, once it's crashed. And then the withdrawal of labour has had a direct impact on fruit and veg sector in particular. So a lot of apple growers have grubbed their apples now and changed the way they farm. I spoke to one last week who was a big supplier of apples to major supermarkets, Aldi, Lidl and Sainsbury's. And they've grubbed over 80% of their apples, and they're basically producing food now, only food for their farm shop. So they're not providing food into the bigger system. And so this is the concern, in that the food production is contracting at the same time in the world when globally food is contracting, and there's a shortage of fertilizer, and fertilizer is so expensive. So there is only one direction for food. It's only going to get more expensive, and inflation is only going to get worse, and we're only going to experience more food shortages.
Well, that's actually shocking. I had no idea the scale of the problem, that it's affecting farmers, no matter kind of what area they're specialised in.
This government is not interested in food. The greenhouse growers, or any grower that's reliant on energy, have been pleading for help. And there has been no help. I mean, Rishi Sunak this week has just agreed huge subsidies for Tata Steel, and there's been nothing for our growers. So a lot of greenhouse growers are not planting this winter. So we'll become wholly reliant on imports for those sort of products this winter, or certainly a lot more reliant on them. And chicken sheds, the same problems because of the cost of energy, and no help. So yeah, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's negligent of the government, irresponsible, arrogant. But we've seen all of this from them before. And I think from the opposition's point of view, maybe our political class altogether are too far removed from the food sector to really understand what is playing out. But every farmer I know is producing less food.
Goodness. And I suppose that the unpredictable weather, that doesn't help either. So,
and we've had a very bad season. Yeah. And
yeah,
Europe the same. Yeah.
Wet summer. Yeah. And so do you think that, that the situation would be helped if we worked with the EU, if we had a closer relationship with the EU?
Yeah, I mean, it's what we need. I mean, if the government had actually done a dig for Britain approach after the Ukraine war happened, there was hope of building up our food stocks here. But because they failed to do that, and more businesses have collapsed, the only real hope for us to ensure our food supply is to free up trade with Europe, so that we will be prioritised again. At the moment, we're not a priority, because lorries don't want to come here, really, because there's nothing for them to take back, or there's long queues and the problems. And so we are heavily reliant on Morocco for fresh goods. And that's why we had the tomato and cucumber and pepper shortage earlier in this year. And so it's not a good situation. And, it is why we joined the EEC in the beginning, because we lost the ability to direct food stocks, because we lost the empire. And, that's why no government will survive extended food shortages. It doesn't matter how big their majority is. So it is, in my view, very short-sighted of opposition not to be getting their heads around this, because it is a serious problem. And it's not just farmers who are saying this, academics are saying it as well. Chris Elliott is very outspoken about it, and other commentators. But there seems to be a sort of cloth-eared approach to it. And it's almost as if they don't believe it until it's too late.
Yeah, I think we've seen that before with this government.
Well, exactly as we saw with COVID, isn't it? It is the same thing, as in a lack of preparedness and a lack of planning, and almost a sort of welcoming of crises. And yes, it's not good. But we'll see what happens. The checks being delayed again are a blessing in some ways because of the food shortages and the inflation. but it just means that there'll be more destruction of British food. So and there's more risk for health. So it is an intolerable situation, and it is unbelievable that nobody out of any of the parties is there screaming for us to rejoin the EU. It makes no sense at all. And it's undemocratic, and it's completely irresponsible.
Yeah, and are you in touch with Scottish farmers? Are they facing different issues, and how are they coping with the schemes that are replacing the EU funding?
Yes, we have got one farmer who's actually up in Orkney, and it's not been as bad, as I said, for Scottish farmers and Welsh farmers, because you're still being subsidised, and they've picked up some advantages from the fallout down here. But it's not to say that they're not awake to it. I mean, an interesting fact about Scottish farmers is that Harper Adams University did some research about the Brexit vote, and the highest vote out of the farming community they found was in Scotland. And that is because everyone says, oh, the farmers influenced everyone to vote Brexit, but that doesn't work, does it? Because obviously the highest Remain vote was in Scotland, and yet the farmers, a lot of them seem to vote, 67% they reckon voted Brexit. So the ones that I have spoken to are Brexit, and one of them is what's his name? He's always on James O'Brien, Murdo Fraser. He's an MSP, and he is a typical sort of ideologue around Brexit, and who seems to understand that farming is going through a difficult time, but still can't seem to accept that Brexit is to blame. So it is a very confusing picture because of the psychology of it all, I suppose. But for Douglas, who's in Orkney, he's a young farmer, and he'd spent some time working out in Australia, I think. And it's very, it's very depressing, because we work hard. Everybody needs to have something to work to and for, and farming in Australia is so much better. It's much better paid and a much better way of life. And so, he's very much in the zone of, oh, I wish I'd never come back, because there's no way of sort of working through this, really, unless you go into this, what we call dog and stick farming, and completely change your farming model. And even then, it's risky. So as Sean Rickard said to me last week, farming right now, farming food is too risky. So.
Wow, yeah, that's kind of frightening. I mean, it is sad for the next generation of farmers coming up. Definitely.
Yeah, but it's also sad for everybody, because it's their food. And when we last went down to 30% self-sufficiency, after the repeal of the Corn Laws in 1846, I don't know if people are familiar with this, they're probably not, and we relied on imports, we went into 2 world wars and we nearly starved. So given the fragility of geopolitics right now, it just seems as though there is no sensible thinking behind this. And I'm somebody that likes to be prepared. And so it actually really makes me feel like screaming at times, because the thought of food shortages is really uncomfortable. It is not, nobody's safe in when there's a severe food shortages. And we haven't exactly got a civil service like we had in the Second World War to actually manage a rationing program. I mean, who's gonna deal with it? So yes, it's not good. So I just hope that perhaps the government go earlier than anticipated, and we do get some more, competent management in there, and people that are open to talking and listening, and making sure that the mechanisms are there to deal with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can totally understand your frustration. I'll just pop over to social media and see if there's any questions coming in for you.
Just one question related to Australia. So you mentioned farming in Australia from your point of view, seemed like a more attractive industry. So one question just about standards. It seems like Australia has a different notion of standards when it comes to things like animal welfare, for example. What's the impact of that on British farming? Is it essentially a race to the bottom, or is that a simple-minded way of thinking about it?
I think in the long run, if this continues to play out, I think what we'll see is more intensification here, and that's already started. I mean, we've already got applications for, super farms coming in. And I think there will be the opportunity then for lower standards to come in, and eventually that dam will burst, against the, and that's the whole reason for the border, for deregulation. That's why the Europeans have got strict controls over anything that's British coming through. And I think then, as I described the one farmer who's only producing food for his own farm shop, I think then for wealthy people or people that can afford it, who want to escape the sort of cheap supermarket food, they will go and buy their food from those outlets. So we will have food inequality in effect. So I think that's how it'll play out. The Australia deal has only recently come in. The quotas are, racked up over, I can't remember if it was 10 or 15 years now. But so we're only in the beginning stages of it. As we get to the end and everything's thrown off, it is cataclysmic for us, because there's no way we can farm as they farm in Australia. They have got huge amounts of land. They've got much better weather. We have to house our animals in the winter. And there is just no way that we can compete with them. So the likelihood is that there will be less cattle, because it's worse for beef. It's absolutely the worst for beef. There will be less cattle here. And, probably less sheep as well. I mean, we are actually in overproduction of sheep. And I can see that sort of really having a big impact on sheep as well, together with the New Zealand deal.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, that's quite shocking. Good. I mean, the facts coming through this evening are really quite shocking.
I think I'm so used to it that I assume everybody knows about it. So hang on a second, I'm just going to close the window because my husband's out there, decided to cut the grass, and he's boring in my window. Hang on one sec. Sorry.
Okay. You have a lovely dresser, by the way. It's very nice.
Thank you.
Okay. Just in terms of getting back to consumers, can you give us some more details on, say, the threats and the risks to consumers' health, and also the threats to the environment?
Well, I mean, they're endless, because we don't, as I said, anything coming. I mean, I know somebody who works in food manufacturing who actually did vote Brexit, and he imported some produce from India soon after Brexit happened, came via Rotterdam, no checks whatsoever. It arrived in Portsmouth and it was full of bugs. And he had no insurance. I mean, this is the thing, he had no insurance. If that had, in the old days, he would have been insured against it. So he had no insurance, and it all had to be destroyed. But right from the outset of Brexit happening, this has been going on. And there's, I don't know if you've heard about the inspections. I think it was something like 19 out of 20 lorries were inspected, and they were all found to be illegal, or having some sort of illegal meat in there, some fresh produce with cooked produce. So the risks are immense. And it is surprising that nothing has happened so far, but it's only a question of time. And we have already got an invasive hornet come in, and there is a potato blight creature coming through. So it's only a question of time before something comes in, because we're not checking anything. And it's totally unacceptable. I mean, we were meant to take back control, and we have completely lost control. And it's incredible that there isn't more outrage about it, given that, you know, they're focusing everybody on the refugees and the danger of asylum seekers coming in on boats. And there's far more risk to people, far more risk to people from, you know, this borders being wide open to anything. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever been to, you know, countries like India and Pakistan where, you know, you can get those very serious illnesses that you can get. And I have heard that, you know, there are markets popping up and they're probably selling a lot of this illegal meat because people have told me, oh, I'm buying my meat in this new market now and it's half the price it is in the supermarket. Well, there's a reason why it's half the price. But with the cost of living crisis, this was always inevitable. And it really does beg a belief that opposition are not talking about it. Because this is the sort of thing that really would help them in an election. They have agreed to a veterinary agreement, or they want to try and agree a veterinary agreement with Europe. So they should be talking about this, but they don't seem to want to be. They just don't seem to want to talk about Brexit. So we just have to continue doing what we can to try and get the message out there as much as we can. But I think that people have got this keep calm and carry on attitude towards it, and because there wasn't a major, and COVID helped insulate against this, because the changes were sort of, were masked in many ways by COVID and the lockdown, that people have been asleep at the wheel. But I think in the last week or so, the press have picked up on these checks, and there is more being spoken about it. But it is important that we do really get our heads around it and communicate it to people. And you know, at the march especially, we need people there. We need, you know, they think they're going to suddenly tinker with this deal with Europe and continue along this Brexit thing, and that we'll just go quiet. And there's just no way that I'm going to go quiet. I'm not happy about anything about Brexit. I'm not going to be happy with the veterinary agreement and still not having freedom of movement and all the benefits that brings. But that's what they're hoping for. We've got a big job to do. Is once the opposition comes in, we've got a big job to sort of push that forward. And I think for Scotland, I know there is this view of, oh, we'll just leave and the union will break up and then we can, it's almost a way of sort of escaping. And I understand it, the problem, but we need to unite, you know, the UK needs to unite to resist this. It's looking highly likely that Ireland is going to become different and, you know, potentially unite and become its own country and escape the English rule. But, you know, from our point of view, more damaging withdrawal is only going to protract all of the problems. And really, for all of us, for our futures, we need to unite and insist on change in the way that this country is ruled, for Wales, Scotland and England, and, you know, and depending on what happens with Northern Ireland as well. And I do, although Southern Ireland is itself separate and in the EU, it still is a problem because you know we're so close to them. But if they do manage to diverge dramatically from EU rules, it will only end up leaching through Ireland. So it is in all of our interests to fight and get our country back.
Yeah. So that march that you referenced, that's the Rejoin march in London on the 23rd, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think the whole thing about rejoin is, it's a difficult word when you're redoing something. It feels like, you know, it's not a positive way of seeing something because you're going back over it again. But we haven't really found another way to explain what it is we need to do, because in going back to Europe, it's not going to be rejoining, because we're going to be joining fresh on a new deal, and it's a positive new deal as far as I'm concerned. You know, I welcome the euro, I welcome Schengen. I think they're positive things, and I believe that our young will welcome them as well. And that is a big job that we've got to get across, because there is, even amongst Remainers, I hear them all the time as in, oh, well, we've got this problem and we'll have to accept the euro, as if it's a bad thing. It needs to be sold. Us having to pay an exchange rate is a tax. Why do we have to pay that tax? So we have to get our heads around positive campaigning, because that is what works and that's what wins hearts and minds. It needs an emotional argument to get people on our side. And in my view, the polls are really moving faster than I ever thought they would. I really thought it would take longer than this, and that's a positive thing. And so we have to really make the most of this momentum now and push it through, because I strongly suspect Labour think that they'll get in and that we'll go quiet, and there's absolutely no way they'll go quiet.
Brilliant. I'm told there's another question coming from social media.
Yeah, so one question just about political motivation. So you talk about the government being essentially disinterested in like the security of our food and the entire sector. Do you think it's possible that there's more to it than that there's a kind of bigger picture, in the sense that the Tories seem to be big fans of deregulation and creating a very deregulated economy overall, and taking this kind of slightly libertarian attitude, I suppose, that's come out of the US. Do you think it's possible that essentially the goal is to do that to farming?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, it seems like it's a new thing, doesn't it? But really, it's the way that it was actually back in the old days when we had an empire, and they famously left everything up to the markets. And I mean, my ancestors fled Ireland and the famine over there, so that's probably why I'm hardwired into being concerned about food shortages and what they're up to. The truth of the matter is that they don't care. They don't believe in fairness. They only care about looking after their own club. And so they think, well, we'll just let the markets decide. And they don't care if, let them eat the cheap imports that come in. I mean, and when I say cheap, they won't be cheap for long, because once they've undercut us, then of course they'll charge more. And that's essentially it. They don't care about, they'll always be okay, won't they? Because they'll always be able to afford food, and that's how they see it. And I honestly do believe that there is a very serious lack of intelligence and common sense within this current crop of Conservatives. And of course, they got rid of the ones that did have any sense, didn't they? And so there seems to be a very sort of short-term approach to anything, instead of actually thinking structure. I mean, look what they've done with schools. And it's no surprise to me, because of what happened to my son and the school that he was in, which was a Conservative, very much a Conservative run school, or the Board of Governors was. And the approach to that school was almost exactly the same. Oh, we don't need systems. Everybody can just, they can just get by. And, if they're naughty, we'll just give them the slipper. It is, their approach is from a bygone era. And they think that they can just blag their way through it. And I think that's really what we've seen. They really are emperors with no clothes. So, and Brexit is exactly that. And they're now reduced to just personal attacks. They've got no arguments. They've got nothing. And the reason, of course, that we haven't really got anyone offering us a choice politically to get rid of Brexit is because of the right-wing press. And that, they're all in it together, aren't they? Together with, the very wealthy people, the very wealthy backers of the Conservative Party. I was interested to hear a couple of weeks ago that Zach Goldsmith was offering to sort of jump on board the Labour Party. And that rang alarm bells for me, because he's obviously if and I haven't heard if Labour have accepted his offer, but if they have, I will be, you know, concerned around that, because whilst he talks the talk on green issues, as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't walk the walk, and the environmentalism has to work alongside food production. You know, we need to have a sensible approach to both, not what the goldsmiths want, which is rewilding everything, bringing back wolves and bears, and and then importing all of our food. So yeah, it is madness, really. And all of the lessons, you know, when you think about what happened with Holodomor and you know, Stalin and Ukraine, and really changing your food system dramatically, it is a mistake, and history has shown us that time and time again. So I hope that Labour will, I do feel Labour will be better, but I think we have our work cut out to ensure that they're not going to get away with ignoring us. That's what I think.
Brilliant. And in terms of Labour, is there been an impact on any specific areas, in terms of like pickers or butchery, you know, packing, canning, and is there any areas that have recovered or?
No, the Labour problems are significant. They have, you know, they have brought in these various visas, but there's still problems with them, which is why there is talk of them bringing back visas for European workers. I mean, the reason, particularly Eastern European people, they are attached to the land. You know, they all understand what to do. But, you know, I went to France and picked fruit when I was 18. This is what young people do. This is the beauty of freedom of movement. I mean, when this is everybody who's claiming benefits should suddenly arrive on a farm and start working on a farm is absolutely mad, because it is a skill. It is a skilled job, and it's a physical job. And it's not something you can learn about when you're aged 50 or 55. It's something that, well, as you can see from Jeremy Clarkson, it doesn't come that naturally. So, and then equally, when you've got immigrants coming from different climates, it's a shock to them, because we have a different food system to them. So it is a major problem, you know, as I've said, the damage, it will continue, and many people will continue to change their businesses because of it, which, as I've said, it means, without a doubt, Brexit means less British food altogether. I can't see it. The only way it's going to ramp up again is big investment in intensified farming, which is why we need to open up trade with Europe again and align with Europe, because then we might get something back. But it's a travesty, really, because we had the best farming system in the world, and our country looks the way it does because of the way that we have farmed for, you know, centuries. Going back to the Neolithic period, this island looks the way it looks because it was man-made. You know, it's not. So all of this thing of going back to the wilderness, as far as I'm concerned, is madness. You know, I was recently in New Zealand, and you know, those islands in New Zealand were not there were no mammals, there were no humans there until fairly late on. And it was a wilderness of nothing. You know, wilderness is a desert. It's why only birds really lived in New Zealand. So there's kind of whole harking back to turning us into some sort of forests with, you know, it just doesn't make any sense, and it isn't actually anything to do with our history. And the way that we farm, or the way we have farmed, is very climate friendly. We hold the solutions to climate crisis. If everybody farmed as we did, you know, with animals that are grazing and sequestering carbon, these are the solutions to climate change and getting rid of the feedlots. But Brexit, you know, imports from Brazil have gone up since Brexit by 67%. And the government have also reduced the checks on Brazilian imports. And they've recently had BSE, a case of BSE, and there's regular problems with salmonella coming in. And there's chicken coming in from there as well. So the fact is that because of Brexit, we will be seeing more rainforest clearance because we're encouraging it. And more animal suffering because these animals are all reared in these in really what for us is very uncomfortable conditions. And this was always going to be the reality of Brexit. But they've been very good at using the greenwashing and the green arguments and to disarm any sort of dissent against it. So many environmentalists were pro-Brexit because they thought it was going to be great to get our environment back. And there's that famous clip of Michael Gove, you know, saying what he said, and of course, look what he's done. You know, they pull the rug from everyone's feet and deliver the absolute worst of all worlds. So it is an absolute travesty. But you know, there's going to be an election within the next year. There will be change, and we have to try and recover what we can. But also we've got to be clear about getting proper constitutional changes in terms of our voting system, because they're seesawing back from Labour making things better and then the Conservatives destroying everything. It's so destructive. We're not making any progress, you know, it's very depressing. And so we need to escape this sort of this horrible system that we've got. And I do think that in the long run, hopefully Brexit changes will be positive. And that's what we have to fight for. We have to make sure that all of the suffering that we've gone through in the last 7 years is worth it. And that's where I hope that we will get.
Okay, thanks. There's one more question from social media.
Yeah, so just a question from Twitter. I think a lot of this information from the point of view of the general public is quite shocking, actually. Do you think, I suppose the question is, what do you think the general public can do to exert political pressure? Can you see a role for like a campaign from a consumer point of view? Is that something worth pursuing, or just in general, what would your suggestion be?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. We did run the standards campaign, and there was an NFU petition which did get over 1 million signatures, but they sort of stood it down really, and everybody thought it had been solved, I suppose. And I guess my problem is I assume that everybody knows what I know, and it, you know, I sort of think surely everyone, and I feel like I'm talking about it and tweeting about it all of the time, and so I think surely they know what I'm talking about. So perhaps I need to go back to the drawing board and think about what we can do. And we did have a letter writing campaign that we had on our website at one stage. Of course, we've got a lot of MPs standing down this election, and then we've got a lot of new MPs coming through. Now, what's his name? Crick has got a Twitter account about all of the new candidates that have been selected. I don't know if Michael Crick, he was BBC journalist, wasn't he? And I think it's really worthwhile, everybody, and I'm doing this in my constituency, speaking to candidates who've been selected and really getting hardline commitments from them. That's what we need to do, because these are the people that are, you know, if you think your seat is going to be won by a Labour MP or a Lib Dem MP, or, you know, if they're the best person to beat the Conservatives or whichever your seat is, you want to make sure that you hold those candidates to account. And the one thing MPs respond to are letters in emails in their inbox. So that is the strongest thing that we can build. And anyone that's going to conference, we've got these coming out, then, you know, get out there and speak. I am hoping to do a panel at the Labour conference with Sean Rickard and with a think tank UK EU Commission. Come along to that and support it. and share what you can. If you need anything from me, I'm here. You can email me, you can reach out to me, help. Everybody needs to help spread the information, I guess. But I think from our point of view, perhaps we need to galvanize people to start approaching candidates, whether they're, if the MPs are sitting again, get their assurances on where they're going to move with food and food standards and imports and food security. And I might just think about revising our letter campaign on our website and getting that going again. It's more to do with resources from our point of view, and getting things together, and just having enough time to run everything. So if anyone wants to help us, we need volunteers.
Great. Well, it's been equally kind of fascinating but shocking speaking to you this evening. But thanks very much for giving us your time this evening. And I think it's a really important message that you have to get across. So thanks very much. And we'll look forward to speaking with you at the Rejoin March.
Yes, thanks very much. And if